I don't believe men were created to be pawns in someone else's game. I believe we were created to be steward kings. Men under authority, yes, but entrusted with real responsibility. Not perfect men, but disciplined ones. Men who rule themselves, serve God directly, and refuse to live in fear. This is king, not pawn. There's a moment in a man's life where everything he's built stops working. Not all at once or dramatically, but noticeably. It starts small. You feel more tired than usual, more irritated, more disconnected. And things that you used to feel were manageable start feeling heavy. And for whatever reason, you can't explain it because from the outside, your life might look fine. You're doing what you're supposed to do, showing up, handling responsibilities, keeping things together. But internally, something is off. This is what the beginning of collapse looks like. Not of your life, but of your false self. The version of you that was built to survive, not to live. The false self, it can really only go so far. The man who adapts to everyone, manages every situation, avoids conflict, controls outcomes. He can function for a while, but he can't sustain it because that version of you is not rooted in truth. It's rooted in reaction. And reaction ultimately is exhausting. There's a kind of man out there who ultimately he admits to himself that he can't keep it up anymore. You say to yourself, I can't keep doing this, not because you don't want to, oftentimes, specifically because you do want to. You just admit that you can't. It's just because you just don't have the energy anymore. And that mask that you've built over the years, it starts to crack. You can't keep saying yes to everything. You can't keep avoiding tension, keep managing people's emotions, or pretending that you're fine. Something starts to break, and it shows up out of nowhere. In your relationships, you start feeling, drained, resentful, disconnected, because you have been giving and giving and giving without being rooted in anything. In your work, you might see this by still performing, but it feels empty, like you're just going through the motion. There's no clarity or any real direction. Might show up in your faith, like you believing, but feeling distant because you've been living externally instead of internally being aligned. Then there's another step in this process, where it's quiet, maybe late at night or in your car or something, where you think to yourself, I don't even know who I am anymore. And that thought, it changes everything because you're not just tired, now you're aware. This is where most men panic because awareness, it creates a choice. You can either face it or avoid it. And most men avoid it. The escape routes, okay? We as men will try to distract ourselves. This could be more work, more entertainment, more noise, anything to just avoid sitting with that truth. But it doesn't fix it because distraction just delays the problem. It doesn't solve it. I want to go ahead and talk about this from like Spider-Man No Way Home for a second. Most of you guys in real life, if you know me, I'm a total Marvel nerd. Um, but this is actually a great example because this is where Peter Parker ends up. Everything in his life starts collapsing. His identity is exposed, his relationships are breaking, his world is just unstable, and he tries to fix it. So he does what any reasonable teenager would do, and he goes to Doctor Strange. He tries to control the outcome and make everything go back to normal, but it backfires, like seriously backfires, because control, it doesn't fix collapse, it just accelerates it. This is the turning point because Peter realizes something. He can't hold on to everything and fix everything at the same time. Something has to go. And this is what the paradox is. And this is where your life is pointing you. Not towards more control, not towards more effort, just towards something a little bit harder. Letting go. The hard truth is that the version of you that got you here cannot take you any further. Let's talk about the modern man who sees this clearly, because this is where they see it not from an emotional stance, but from a clear stance. This version of me is just not it anymore. And that realization is heavy because it means loss of identity, control, familiarity, everything you've been relying on. But that's where real change begins. You don't become a true king by improving the false self. You become a true king by letting it die. This is why it feels like everything is falling apart, because in a way it is, just not in the way you might think. It's not that your life is collapsing, it's just that the version of you that was never meant to last is. That's a good thing, even if it doesn't feel like it right now, because what comes next requires space. You cannot build something real on top of something false. If things feel like they're breaking, pay attention. You're not losing your life, you're losing the version of you that was never meant to lead it. The life you built to survive was never meant to sustain you.